welcome to Booktopia.
Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure.
Thanks.
Now, your new book, The Social Diary,
Yes.
is out in the shops
Yes.
and is selling well on Booktopia already.
Oh, good.
I just want to know straight up, because of your other career.
Yes, I have another career as a terrible gossip columnist. Yes.
Is it a freedom to enter into the world of fiction?
Oh, it's such a relief to do fiction after having to write gossip, and just being able to create characters inspired by people I know, but without having to call them and tell them the bad news that they're being caught in print.
So, is it kind of a dangerous life being the gossip columnist? Do you have friends left, or is it what is the sort of the life, and is it sort of translated into the novel?
Yeah, and a lot of the I tried to capture the real life of a gossip columnist in the novel, because there were so many people see the surface, but they don't see the actual process. So I took them into the newsroom and I showed them some of the stuff that I've had to do, which isn't, and the battles that you have as a gossip columnist, just to get photographers to come out on the spur of the moment. I mean, and having to, in the old days, this is set in the 80s, but in the old days, you had to sort of try and get the gossip and also be the camera girl. So you had to stand there with the photographer's flash in the air, looking like I don't know what.
Statue of Liberty.
Exactly, the Statue of Liberty. And but as for, it is a dangerous world. Just last week I got this 14-page letter from someone telling me they were going to sue me, and they were going to bankrupt me, and it was this
14 pages is a lot of effort to go to.
I know, and I wanted to say, what drugs are you on to do this and to put this amount of time in, but of course I couldn't, so I just, I didn't want to inflame him any further.
Yeah, no.
But I did start looking around, because this particular person is known to kind of stalk, so, I've been looking when I come out the front door.
So it's a much safer world being a novelist.
Much safer. I mean, people just say, it's a novel, we don't really care. There's so many books, we don't care what she says.
So, can you just tell me a little bit about The Social Diary?
Yeah. Well, The Social Diary is set in the 80s, and it's the start of a trilogy. But I chose to start with the 80s because the characters were so fantastic then. They were larger than life. And it was an interesting time. Sydney was becoming less about establishment money, and all these kind of terrible entrepreneurs were sweeping in and buying up, parts of Sydney and throwing their money around, and restaurants were having to get more champagne in. It had to be French, it had to be vintage, and women were wearing the big shoulders, and they were all getting pissed, and it was fabulous.
So the new money injection into Sydney.
Yeah, and for me, I've been always, I always kind of hate snobs of any kind, and when I started doing kind of the social pages, you'd have people calling and saying that you had to cover their party because such and such would be there, and they had a title. And I'd go, how boring.
It sounds
They
like
go
the
to
19th
everything.
century. It sounds like the 19th century or the 50s or something, that sort of approach.
It is that sort of approach, but it took a long time to die. But it was only when the new money swept into Sydney that it did die. So, and I love the characters then, that, they were having amazing parties, there were fireworks and all sorts of things. And so it was, and the people, you think of people like Skase and, Bondi and all those people that were running around at the time.
We had Hawke as a Prime Minister.
Exactly, you couldn't help but be inspired. So that's about The Social Diary. There's a lot of that going on.
So in your work, you're surrounded by journalists, you're in the print industry.
Yes.
What is the difference between gossip and news?
Well, you see, gossip's just the more salacious form of news. But the basic principles apply. I mean, I've never been sued despite all these threats. But the reason is because you've got to get both sides of the story, as you would with any news story. So, and that means some unpleasantness, ringing people up and asking them if it's true that, whatever. And but it's basically a news story that's juicy.
And how do you stop being used by like little pop celebrities that want to sort of get into those pages to be seen? And they must be always trying to attract your attention.
Oh, they are, but I've seen it all before. Nobody can get anything past me. I know all the scams. I also would say that I know where all the bodies are buried in Sydney and who was at the funeral. I mean, I know everything. And I also have an inbuilt kind of irk factor. And when somebody comes to me and my little my big, whatever, my stomach goes, oh, I know, this isn't good.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm thinking, when I'm thinking about this book, I'm thinking people who may have enjoyed The Devil Wears Prada,
Yes.
maybe jumping straight into your series as well.
Yeah.
Where do you think the series is heading? Like, you think you have 2 books or more? Is
Yeah,
it?
another 2 to come, yeah.
So what are you going to go 90s then the noughties, or is it?
No, I'm going straight to the noughties.
Yeah?
Yeah, and the difference between, The Social Diary is all about new money, and the next book is all about celebrity and, how that, a lot of the characters are celebrities, and there's bloggers, and there's social media coming into play, and that's great, because when I wrote The Social Diary, mobile phones hadn't really been invented, and nobody really had one in the 80s, so it was kind of, I couldn't really move the plot along the way I wanted to, because the person always had to go home and wait for the message on their answer phone. But now, with this next book, there's so much more scope, and
Everything
I love
moves
that.
so fast.
Yeah. You just have to glance at your phone and know you're in trouble.
Ros, thank you very much for coming and talking about The Social Diary with us.
Thank you.
Ros's novel, The Social Diary, is available from booktopia.com.au right now.